Hey guys, it's Cassidy again, and today we're going to continue our reading of The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Alright. Chapter 75. I made it through dinner without anyone trying to kill me, and Jameson never showed. I told Lisa that I needed some air, but didn't go outside. I couldn't face the press again this soon, so I ended up going in another wing of the museum instead, or in plain shadow behind me. The wing was closed. The lights were dim and the exhibit rooms were blocked off, but the corridor was open. I walked down the long hall, Orrin's footsteps trailing mine. Up ahead, there was a light shining, bright against all its surroundings. The cord blocking off this exhibit room had been moved to one side. Stepping past it felt just like stepping out of a dark theater and into the sun. The room was bright. Even the frames on the paintings were white. There was only one person in the room, wearing a tuxedo without the jacket. Jameson. I said his name, but he didn't turn. He was standing in front of a small painting, looking at it intently from 3 or 4 feet away. He glanced at me as I walked toward him, then turned back to the painting. You saw me, I thought. You saw the way they did my hair. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the beating of my own heart. Say something. He nodded toward the painting. 4 brothers, he said as I came to stand beside him. A Hawthorne family favorite, for obvious reasons. I made myself look at the painting, not him. There were 4 figures on the canvas, their features blurred. I could make out the lines of their muscles. I could practically see them in motion. But the artist hadn't been aiming for realism. My eyes went to the gold tag under the paintings. Jameson angled his face toward mine. I know you found the date report. He arched an eyebrow. You beat me to it. So did Grayson, I said. Jameson's expression darkened. You were right. The tree in the blackwood was just a tree. The clue we're looking for is just a number. 811. There's just one more. There is no we, I said. Do you even see me as a person, Jameson? Or am I just a tool? I might have deserved that. He held my gaze a moment longer, then looked back at the painting. The old man used to say that I have laser focus. I'm not built to care more than one thing at a time. I wonder if that thing was the game or her. I'm done, Jameson. My words echoed in the white room. With you, with whatever this is. I turned to walk away. I don't care that you're wearing Emily's braid. Jameson knew exactly what to say to make me stop. I don't care, he repeated, because I don't care about Emily. He let out a ragged breath. I broke up with her that night. I got tired of her little games. I told her I was done, and a few hours later, she died. I turned back, and green eyes, a little bloodshot, settled on mine. I'm sorry, I said, wondering how many times he'd replayed their last conversation. Come with me to the Blackwood, Jameson pleaded. He was right. He did have laser focus. You don't have to kiss me. You don't even have to like me, Eris, but please don't make me do this alone. He sounded raw, real in a way that he'd never had before. You don't have to kiss me. He said that like he wanted me to. I hope I'm not interrupting. In unison, Jameson and I looked toward the doorway. Grayson stood there, and I realized that from his vantage point, all he would have seen when he walked into the room was the braid. For a moment, Grayson and Jameson stared at each other. You know where I'll be, Eris, Jameson told me, if there's any part of you that wants to find me. He brushed past Grayson on his way out the door. Grayson watched him go for the longest time before he turned back to me. What did he say when he saw you? When he saw my hair, I swallowed. He told me that he broke up with Emily the night she died. Silence. I turned back to look at Grayson. His eyes were closed, every muscle in his body taut. Did Jameson tell you that I killed her? Chapter 76. After Grayson left, I spent another 15 minutes in the gallery alone, staring at the 4 brothers painting before Lisa sent someone to find me. I agree, Xander told me, even though I hadn't said anything for him to agree with. This party sucks. The socialite to scone ratio is pretty much unforgivable. I wasn't in the mood for scone jokes. Jameson says he broke up with Emily. Grayson claims he killed her. Dia is using me to punish them both. I'm out of here, I told Xander. You can't leave yet. I gave him a look. Why not? Because, Xander waggled his lone eyebrow. They just opened up the dance floor. You want to give the press something to talk about, don't you? One dance. That was all I was giving Elisa, and the photographers, before I got the hell out of there. Pretend I'm the most fascinating person you've ever met, Xander advised as he escorted me into the dance floor with a waltz. He held out a hand for mine, then curved his other arm around my back. Here, I'll help. Every year on my birthday, from the time I was 7 until I was 12, my grandfather gave me money to invest, and I spent it all in cryptocurrency because I'm a genius, and not at all because I thought cryptocurrency sounded kind of cool. He spun me once. I sold my holdings before my grandfather died for almost $100 million. I stared at him. You what? See, he told me. Fascinating. Xander kept right on dancing, but he looked down. Not even my brothers know. What did your brothers invest in? I asked. All this time, I'd been assuming they'd been cut off with nothing. Nash had told me about Tobias Hawthorne's birthday tradition, but I hadn't thought twice about their investments. No idea, Xander said jauntily. We weren't allowed to discuss it. We danced on, the photographer snapping the shots. Xander brought his face very close to mine. The press is going to think we're dating, I told him, my mind still spinning at his revelation. As it so happens, Xander replied archly, I excel at fake dating. Who exactly did you fake date? I asked. Xander looked past me to Thea. I am a human Rube Goldberg machine, he said. I do simple things in complicated ways. He paused. It was Emily's idea for Thea and me to date. Em was, shall we say, persistent. She didn't know that Thea was already with someone. And you agreed to put on a show? I asked incredulously. I repeat, I am a human Rube Goldberg machine. His voice softened. And I didn't do it for Thea. Then for who? It took me a moment to put it together. Xander had mentioned fake dating twice before, one with respect to Thea, and once when I asked him about Rebecca. Thea and Rebecca? I asked. Deeply in love, Xander confirmed. Thea called her painfully beautiful. The best friend and the younger sister. What was I supposed to do? They didn't think Emily would understand. She was possessive of the people she loved, and I knew how hard it was for Rebecca to go against her. Just once, Bex wanted something for herself. I wondered if Xander had feelings for her, if fake dating Thea had been his twisted, Rube Goldberg way of saying that. Were Thea and Rebecca right? I asked, about Emily not understanding. And then some. Xander paused. Em found out about them that night. She saw it as a betrayal. That night, the night she died. The music came to an end, and Xander dropped my hand, keeping his other arm around my waist. Smile for the press, he murmured. Give them a story. Look deep into my eyes. Feel the weight of my charm. Think of your favorite baked goods. The edges of my lips turned up, and Xander Hawthorne escorted me off the dance floor to Elisa. You can go now, she told me, pleased, if you'd like. Hell yes. You coming? I asked Xander. The invitation seemed to surprise him. I can't, he paused. I solved the black wood. That got my full attention. I could win this. Xander looked down with his fancy shoes. At his fancy shoes. But Jameson and Grayson needed more. Head back to Hawthorne House. There will be a helicopter waiting for you when you get there. Have the pilot fly you over the Blackwood. A helicopter? Where you go, Xander told me, they'll follow. They, as in his brothers. I thought you wanted to win, I said to Xander. He swallowed hard. I do. Chapter 77. I'd only halfway believed Xander when he promised me a helicopter, but there it was, on the front lawn of Hawthorne House, ablaze still. Orrin wouldn't let me step foot aboard until he checked it over. Even then, he insisted on taking the pilot spot. I climbed in the back and discovered Jameson already there. Order a helicopter? He asked me like that was a perfectly normal thing to do. I buckled myself into the seat next to him. I'm surprised you waited for liftoff. I told you, Eris. He gave me a crooked smile. I don't want to do this alone. For a split second, it was like the two of us were back at the racetrack, barreling toward the finish line. Then outside the helicopter, a flash of black caught my eye. A tuxedo. Grayson's expression was impossible to read as he climbed on board. Did Jameson tell you that I killed her? The echo of the question was deafening in my mind. As if he'd heard it, Jameson's head whipped toward Grayson. What are you doing here? Xander had said that where I went, both of them would follow. Jameson didn't follow me, I reminded himself, every nerve in my body alive. He got here first. May I? Grayson asked me, nodding toward an empty seat. I could feel Jameson staring at me, feeling him willing me to say no. I nodded. Grayson sat beside me. Orrin checked to make sure we were secure, then turned on the rotor. Within a minute, the sound of the blades was deafening. My heart jumped into my throat as we took into the air. I'd enjoyed my first time on an airplane, but this was different. It was more. The noise, the vibration. The vibration, the heightened sense that almost nothing separated me from the air or the ground. My heart was beating, but I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear myself think. Not about the way Grayson's voice had broken as he'd asked that question. Not about the way Jameson had told me that I didn't have to kiss him or like him. All I could think about was looking down. As we flew over the edge of the black wood, I could make out the twisted angle of trees down below, too dense for sunlight to shine through. But when my gaze shifted toward the center of the forest, the trees thinned out, opening to a clearing in the very center. Jameson and I had been nearing the clearing when Drake had started taking shots. I noted the grass, but I hadn't seen it, not the way I'd seen it now. I was seeing it now. From overhead, the clearing, the lighter ring of trees surrounding it, and the dense outer forest formed what looked like a long, skinny letter O, or a zero. By the time the helicopter touched down, I felt like I was getting ready to burst out of my skin. I hopped out before the blades had fully stopped, adrenaline-fueled and giddy. 8110. Jameson bounded toward me. We did it, Eris. He stopped right in front of me, lifting his hands palm up. Drunk on the high of the helicopter, I did the same, and his fingers locked to mine. 4 middle names, 4 numbers. Kissing him had been a mistake. Holding his hands now was a mistake, too, but I didn't care. 8110, I said. That's the order we discovered the numbers in, and the orders of the clues in the will. Westbrook, Davenport, Winchester, and Blackwood in that order. A combination, maybe? There are at least a dozen safes in the house, Jameson mused, but there are other possibilities. An address, coordinates, and there's no guarantee that the clue isn't scrambled. To solve it, we may have to reorder the numbers. I closed my eyes, just for a second, just long enough for my brain to put together another possibility. A date? All 4 clues were numbers, they were also single digits. For a combination lock or coordinates, I would have expected some 2-digit entries. But a date? The 1 or the 0 would have to go at the front. 1108 would be November 8th. November 8th, I said, and then I ran through the rest of the possibilities. August 11th. January 18th. Then I hit the last possibility, the last date. I stopped breathing. This was too big of a coincidence to be a coincidence at all. 10/18, October 18th. I sucked in a breath. Every nerve in my body felt like it was alive. That's my birthday. I have a secret my mother had told me on my 15th birthday, 2 years ago, days before she died. About the day you were born. No. Grayson dropped my hands. Yes, I replied, I was born on October 18th, and my mother. This isn't about your mother. Jameson balled his fingers into fists and stepped back. Jameson? I had no idea what was going on here. If Tobias Hawthorne had chosen me because of something that happened the day I was born, this was big. Huge. This could be it. Maybe his path crossed my mom's while she was in labor. Maybe she did something for him while she was pregnant with me. Stop. The word cracked like a whip. Jameson was looking at me like I was unnatural, broken, like the sight of me could turn stomachs, including and especially his. What are you? The numbers aren't to date. Yes, I thought fiercely, they are. This can't be the answer, he said. I stepped forward, but he jerked back. I felt a light touch on my arm. Grayson. As gentle as his touch was, I got the distinct sense he was holding me back. Why? What had I done? Emily died, Grayson told me, his voice tight, on October 18th, a year ago. That sick son of a bitch, Jameson cursed. All of this, the clues, the will, her, all of it for this? You just found a random person born that day to send a message? This message? Jamie, don't talk to me. Jameson swung his gaze from Grayson to me. Screw this, I'm done. As he stalked away into the night, I called after him. Where are you going? Congratulations, Eris, Jameson called back, his voice dripping with everything but felicitations. I guess you had the good fortune of being born on the right day. Mystery solved. Chapter 78. There had to be more to the puzzle than this. There had to be. I couldn't just be a random person born on the right calendar date. That can't be it. What about my mother? What about her secret? A secret she'd mentioned on my 15th birthday, a full year before Emily had died. And what about the letter Tobias Hawthorne had left me? I'm sorry. What did Tobias Hawthorne have to apologize for? He didn't just randomly select a person with the right birthday. There had to be more to it than that. But I could hear Nash still telling me, you're the glass ballerina or the knife. I'm sorry. Grayson spoke again beside me. It's not Jameson's fault he's like this. It's not Jameson's fault. The invincible Grayson Hawthorne seemed to be having trouble talking. That this is how the game ends. I was still wearing the clothes from the gala. My hair was still in Emily's braid. I should have known. Grayson's voice was swollen with emotion. I did know. The day the will was read, I knew that all of this was because of me. I thought of the way Grayson had shown up at my hotel room that night. He'd been angry, determined to figure out what I had done. What are you talking about? I searched his face and eyes for answers. How is this because of you? And don't tell me you killed Emily. No one, not even Thea, had called Emily's death a murder. I did, Grayson insisted, his voice low and vibrating with intensity. If it weren't for me, she wouldn't have been there. She wouldn't have jumped. My throat went dry. Then where? I asked quietly. And what does this have to do with your grandfather's will? Grayson shuddered. Maybe I was meant to tell you, he said after a long while. Maybe that was always the point. Maybe you were always meant to be equal parts puzzle and penance. He bowed his head. I'm not your penance, Grayson Hawthorne. I didn't get the chance to say it out loud before he was talking again. And once he started, it would have taken an act of God to stop him. We'd always known her. Mr. and Mrs. Laughlin had always been at Hawthorne House. Their daughters and granddaughters used to live in California. The girls came to visit twice a year, once with their parents at Christmas time, and again in the summer, for 3 weeks alone. We didn't see much of them at Christmas, but in the summers we all played together. It was a bit like summer camp, really. You have camp friends who you see once a year, who have no place in your ordinary life. That was Emily and Rebecca. They were so different from the 4 of us. Sky said it was because they were girls, but I always thought it was because there were only 2 of them, and Emily came first. She was a force of nature, and their parents were always so worried she'd overexert herself. She was allowed to play cards with us and other quiet indoor games, but she wasn't allowed to roam outside the way we did, or to run. She'd get us to bring her things. It became a bit of a tradition. Emily would set us on a hunt, and whoever found what she'd requested, the more unusual and harder to find, the better, won. What did you win? I asked. Grayson shrugged. We're brothers. We didn't have to win anything. Just win. That tracked. And then Emily got a heart transplant, I said. Jameson had told me that much. He said that afterward. She wanted to live. Her parents were still protective, but Emily had lived in glass cages long enough. She and Jameson were 13. I was 14. She'd breeze in for the summers, the consummate daredevil. Rebecca was always after us to be careful, but Emily insisted that her doctors had said that her activity level was only limited by her stamina. If she could do it, there was no reason she shouldn't. The family moved here permanently when Emily was 16. She and Rebecca didn't live on the estate the way they had during visits, but my grandfather paid for them to attend private school. I saw where this was going. She wasn't just a summer camp friend anymore. She was everything, Grayson said, and he didn't exactly say that it was a compliment. Emily had the entire school eating out of the palm of her hand. Maybe that was our fault. Even just being Hawthorne adjacent changed the way people looked at you. Thea's statement came back to me. Or maybe, Grayson continued, it was just because she was in. Too smart, too beautiful, too good at getting what she wanted. She had no fear. She wanted you, I said, and Jameson, and she didn't want to choose. She turned it into a game. Grayson shook his head. And God help us, we played. I want to say that it was because we loved her, that it was because of her. But I don't even know how much of that was true. There's nothing more Hawthorne than winning. Had Emily known that and used it to her advantage? Had it ever hurt her? The thing was, Grayson choked, she didn't just want us. She wanted what we could give her. Money? Experiences, Grayson replied. Thrills, race cars and motorcycles and handling exotic snakes. Parties and clubs and places we weren't supposed to be. It was a rush, for her and for us. He paused. For me, he corrected. I don't know what it was exactly for Jamie. Jameson broke up with her the night she died. One night, I got a call from Emily, late. She said she was done with Jameson and that all she wanted was me. Grayson swallowed. She wanted to celebrate. There's this place called Devil's Gate. It's a cliff overlooking the Gulf. One of the most famous cliff diving locations in the world. Grayson angled his head down. I knew it was a bad idea. I tried to form words, any words. How bad? He was breathing heavily now. When we got there, I headed for one of the lower cliffs. Emily headed for the top. past the danger signs, past the warnings. It was the middle of the night. We shouldn't have been there at all. I don't know why she wouldn't let me wait until morning. Not until later, when I realized she'd lied about choosing me. Jameson had broken up with her. She'd called Grayson, and he hadn't been in the mood to wait. Cliff diving killed her? I asked. No, Grayson said. She was fine. We were fine. I wanted to grab our towels, but when I came back, Emily wasn't even in the water anymore. She was just lying on the shoreline, dead. He closed his eyes. Her heart. You didn't kill her, I said. The adrenaline did. Or the altitude, the change in pressure. I don't know. Jameson wouldn't take her. I shouldn't have either. She made decisions. She had agency. It wasn't your job to tell her no. I knew instinctively that no good would come of saying any of that, even if it was true. You know what my grandfather told me after Emily's funeral? Family first. He said that what happened to Emily wouldn't have happened if I'd put my family first. If I'd refused to play along, if I'd chosen my brother over her. Grayson's vocal cords tensed against his throat, as if he wanted to say something else but couldn't. Finally, it came. That's what this is about. 1018. October 18th. The day Emily died. Your birthday. It's my grandfather's way of confirming what I already knew deep down. That all of this is because of me. Chapter 79. When Grayson left, Orrin escorted me back to the house. How much did you hear? I asked him, my mind tangled with thoughts and emotions I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. Orrin gave me a look. How much do you want me to have heard? I bit the inside of my lip. You knew Tobias Hawthorne. Why would he have picked me to inherit just because Emily died on my birthday? Did he decide to leave his fortune to a random person born on October 18th? Total lottery? I don't know, Avery. Orrin shook his head. The only person who ever knew what he was thinking was Mr. Hawthorne himself. I made my way back through the halls of Hawthorne House, back toward the wing I shared with my sister. I wasn't certain that either Grayson or Jameson would ever speak a word to me again. I didn't know what the future held, or why the idea that I might have been chosen for a completely trivial reason felt like such a punch to the gut. How many people on this planet shared my birthday? I stopped on the stairs in front of the portrait of Tobias Hawthorne that Xander had showed me what felt like a lifetime ago. I racked my mind now, as I'd done then, for any memory, any moment in time when my path had crossed with the billionaires. I looked at Tobias Hawthorne in the eye, Grayson's silver eyes, and I silently asked him why. Why me? Why were you sorry? I pictured my mother playing I Have a Secret. Did something happen the day I was born? I stared at the portrait, taking in every wrinkle on the old man's face, every hint to personality in his posture, even the muted color in the background. No answers. My eyes caught on the artist's signature. Tobias Hawthorne. XXVIII. I looked back at the old man's silver eyes. The only one who ever really knew what he was thinking was Mr. Hawthorne himself. This was a self-portrait, and the letters next to the name? Roman numerals, I whispered. Avery, Orrin said beside me. Everything okay? In Roman numerals, 10, X was 10, V was 5, and I was 1. 10, I put my finger under the first 10, then moved it to the rest of the letters, reading them as a single unit. 18. Remembering the mirror that had hidden the armory, I reached behind the portrait's frame. I wasn't sure what I was feeling for until I found it. A button. A release. I pushed it, and the portrait swung outward. Behind it, on the wall, was a keypad. Avery, Orrin said again, but I was already bringing my fingers up to the keypad. What if the numbers aren't the final answer? The possibility caught me in its jaws and wouldn't let go. What if they're meant to lead to the next clue? I brought my index finger to the keypad and tried the obvious combination. 1018. There was a beep, and then the top of the step below me began to rise, revealing a compartment underneath. I ducked down and reached inside. There was only one thing in the hollowed stair, a piece of stained glass. It was purple in the shape of an octagon, with a tiny hole in the top through which a sheer, shimmering ribbon had been threaded. It looked almost like a Christmas ornament. As I held the stained glass up by the string, my eyes caught on the underside of the panel. Etched into the wood was the following verse. Top of the clock, meet me at high, tell the late day hello. Wish the morning goodbye, a twist and a flip. What do you see? Take them 2 at a time, and then come find me. Chapter 80. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with the stained glass ornament, or what to make of the words written under the stair, but as Liddy helped me let my hair down that night, one thing was perfectly clear. The game wasn't over. The next morning, with Orrin in my wake, I went in search of Grayson and Jameson. I found the armory in the solarium, shirtless and standing in the doorway. "Go away," he said when I opened the door, without even looking to see who it was. "I found something," I told him. "I don't think the date is the answer, at least not all of it." He didn't reply. "Jameson, are you listening to me? I found something." For the little time I'd known him, he'd been driven, obsessed. What I held in my hand should have engendered at least a glimmer of curiosity, but when he turned to face me, his eyes dull, all he said was, "Toss it over with the rest." I looked, and in a nearby trash can I saw at least half a dozen stained glass octagons, identical to the one that I had, right down to the ribbons. "The numbers 10 and 18 are everywhere in this freaking house." Grayson's voice was muted, his manner contained. "I found them scratched into a panel on my closet floor. The little purple bugger was underneath." He didn't bother gesturing to the trash can or specifying which piece of stained glass he was referring to. "And the others?" I asked. "Once I started looking for the numbers, I couldn't stop. And once you see it," Jameson said, his voice low, "you can't unsee it." The old man thought he was so smart. He must have hidden hundreds of those things all over the house. I found a chandelier with 18 crystals in the outer circle and 10 in the middle, and a hidden compartment down below. There are 18 stone leaves on the fountain outside, and 10 finely drawn roses in its bowl. The paintings in the music room. Jameson looked down. "Everywhere I look, everywhere I go, another reminder." "Don't you see?" I told him fiercely. "Your father couldn't have done this all after Emily died. You would have noticed. Workmen in the house?" Jameson said, finishing my sentence. "The great Tobias Hawthorne added a room or wing to this place every year, and in a house this size, something's always needing to be replaced or repaired. My mother was always buying new paintings, new fountains, new chandeliers. We wouldn't have noticed a thing." 1018 isn't the answer," I insisted, rolling his eyes to mine. "You have to see that. It's a clue, one he didn't want us to miss." Us. I'd said us, and I meant it. But that didn't matter. 1018 is answer enough, Jameson said, turning his back on me. "I told you, Avery, I'm not playing anymore." Grayson was harder to find. Eventually I tried the kitchen and found Nash instead. "Have you seen Grayson?" I asked him. Nash's expression was guarded. I don't think he wants to see you, kid." The night before, Grayson hadn't blamed me, he hadn't lashed out. But after he told me about Emily, he'd walked away, left me alone. "I need to see him," I said. "Give it some time," Nash advised. "Sometimes you gotta excise a wound before it can heal." I ended up back at the staircase to the east wing, back in front of the portrait. Orrin got a call, and he must have decided the threat to me was contained enough now that he didn't need to watch me mope around Hawthorne House all day. He excused himself, and I went back to staring out Tobias Hawthorne. It had seemed like fate when I'd found the clue in this portrait, but after talking to Jameson, I knew it wasn't a sign or even a coincidence. The clue I'd found had been one of many. "You didn't want them to miss this," I addressed the billionaire silently. If he had really done all this after Emily's death, the persistence seemed cruel. Did you want to make sure they wouldn't forget what happened? Is this whole twisted game just a reminder to put family first? Is that all I am? Jameson had said right from the beginning that I was special. I hadn't realized until now how badly I'd wanted to believe he was right. I wanted to believe Tobias Hawthorne had seen something in me that had told him I could do this, that I could handle the stairs and the limelight, the responsibility, the riddles, the threats, all of it. I wanted to matter. I didn't want to be the glass boot ballerina or the knife. I wanted to prove, at least to myself, that I was something. Jameson had been done with the game, but I wanted to win. Chapter 81. Top of the clock, meet me at high, tell the late day hello, wish the morning goodbye, a twist and a flip. What do you see? Take them 2 at a time and come find me. I sat on the steps, staring at the words, then worked over the rhyme line by line, turning the piece of stained glass over in my hands. Top of the clock. I pictured a clock's face in my head. What's at the top? 12. I rolled that over in my mind. The number at the top of the clock is 12. Like dominoes, that set off a chain reaction in my mind. Meet me at high what? Noon. That was a guess, but the next 2 lines seemed to confirm it. Noon happened in the middle of the day when you said goodbye to the morning and hello to what came after. I moved to the second half of the riddle, and I got nothing. A twist and a flip, what do you see? Take them two at a time, then come find me. I focused on the stained glass. Was I supposed to twist it? Flip it? Did we need to assemble all the pieces somehow? You look like you swallowed a squirrel. Xander plopped down on the stairs next to me. I definitely did not look like I swallowed a squirrel, but I was guessing that was Xander's way of asking if I was okay, so I let it go. Your brothers don't want anything to do with me, I said quietly. I guess my kind gesture of sending you all to the black wood together exploded. Xander made a face. To be fair, most of my gestures ended up exploding. That startled a laugh out of me. I tilted the step in his direction. The game's not over, I told him. He read the inscription. I found it last night after the blackwood. I held up the stained glass. What do you make of this? Now, where, Xander said thoughtfully, have I seen something that looks like that? Chapter 82. I hadn't been back in the great room since the reading of the will. Its stained glass window was tall, 8 feet high to only 3 feet wide, and the lowest point was even with the top of my head. The design was simple and geometric. In the topmost corners were 2 octagons, the exact size, shade, color, and cut as the one in my hand. I craned my neck to get a better look. A twist and a flip. What do you think? Xander asked me. I cocked my head to the side. I think we're going to need a ladder. Perched high on the ladder with Xander holding it down below, I pressed my hand against one of the stained glass octagons. At first, nothing happened, but when I pushed on the left side, the octagon rotated, 70 degrees, and then something stopped it. Does that qualify as a twist? I turned the second octagon. Pressing left and right didn't do anything, but pushing at the bottom did. The glass flipped 180 degrees and then some, before locking into place. I made my way back down to Xander, who was holding the ladder, unsure what I'd accomplished. A twist and a flip, I recited. What do you see? We stepped back, taking in the wide view. The sun shone through the window, causing diffused color lights to appear on the great room floor. The 2 panels I turned, in contrast, cast purple beams. Eventually those beams crossed. What do you see? Xander spotted at the spot where the beams light on the floor. Nothing, he tested the floorboard. I was expecting it to give out, or to give. I went back to the riddle. What do you see? I saw the light. I saw the beams crossing. When that didn't go anywhere, I looked farther back into the poem, all the way to the top. Noon, I remembered. The first half of the riddle described noon. The gears in my brain turned faster. The angle of the beams must depend at least a little on the angle of the sun. Maybe the twist and flip only show you what you need to see at noon. Xander chewed on that for a second. We could wait, he said, or, he dragged out the word, we could cheat. We spread out, testing the surrounding floorboards. It wasn't that long until noon. The angles couldn't change that much. I tapped the heel of my hand against board after board. Secure, secure, secure. Find anything? Xander asked me. The board beneath my hand wasn't wiggling, but it did have more give than the others. Xander, over here. He joined me, placed his hands on the board, and pressed. The board popped up. Xander removed it, revealing a small dial underneath. I turned the knob, not knowing what to expect. The next thing I knew, Xander and I were sinking. The floor around us was sinking. When it stopped, Xander and I weren't in the great room anymore. We were underneath it. And directly in front of us was a set of stairs. I was going to go out on a limb and guess this was one of the entrances to the tunnels that Orin didn't know about. Take the stairs 2 at a time, I told Xander. That's the next line. Take them 2 at a time and come find me. Chapter 83. I had no idea what would have happened if we hadn't descended the stairs 2 at a time, but I was glad we hadn't found out. Ever been in the tunnels? I asked Xander once we'd made it down. Xander was silent long enough to make the question feel loaded. No. Concentrating, I took in my surroundings. The tunnels were metal, like a giant pipe or something out of a sewer system, but they were surprisingly well lit. Gaslights, I wondered? I'd lost any sense of how far we were down here. Up ahead, the tunnel spread out in 3 directions. Which way? I asked Xander. Solemnly, he pointed straight ahead. I frowned. How do you know? Because, Xander replied jauntily. That's what he said. He gestured to my feet. I looked down and yelped. It took me a moment to realize there were gargoyles at the bottom of the steps, a match for the ones in the great room, except that the gargoyle on the left had one hand and one finger extended, pointing the way. Come find me. I started walking. Xander followed. I wondered if he had any idea what we were walking toward. I remembered Xander telling me that even if I thought that I'd manipulated Tobias Hawthorne, the old man would have been the one manipulating me. He's dead, I told myself. Isn't he? That thought hit me hard. The press certainly thought that Tobias Hawthorne had died. His family seemed to believe it, but had they actually seen his body? What else could it mean? Come find me. 5 minutes later, we hit a wall. There was nowhere else to go, nothing to see, no turns we could have taken since we started down this path. Maybe the gargoyle lied. Xander sounded like he was enjoying that statement a little too much. I pushed against the wall. Nothing. I turned back. Did we miss something? Perhaps, Xander said thoughtfully. The gargoyle lied. I looked back the way we'd come. I walked the path back slowly, taking in every detail, bit by bit by bit. There was a metal grate built into the tunnel floor. I ducked down. There was a brand name engraved on the metal, but time had worn away most of the letters. The only ones were left were M and E. Come find me, I whispered. Squatting down, I grabbed the grate with my fingers and pulled. Nothing. I pulled again, and this time the grate had popped up. I fell backward, but Xander caught me. The two of us stared down into the hole below. It is possible, Xander whispered, that the gargoyle was telling the truth. Without waiting for me, he lowered himself into the hole and dropped. You coming? If Horn knew I was doing this, he would kill me. I dropped down and found myself in a small room. How far underground are we now? The room had 4 walls, 3 of them identical. The 4th was made of concrete. 3 letters had been carved into the cement. AKG. My initials. I walked toward the letters mesmerized, and then I saw a red laser-like light pass over my face. There was a beep, and then the concrete wall was split in 2, like an elevator opening. Behind it was a door. Facial recognition, Xander said. It didn't matter which one of us found this place. Without you, we wouldn't have been able to get it past the wall. Poor Jameson. He'd gone through all that effort to keep me close, then ditched me before I could play my part. The glass ballerina, the knife, the girl with the face that unlocks the wall that reveals the door that what? I stepped forward to examine the door. There were 4 touchpads, 1 in each corner of the room. Xander hit one to wake it up, and an image of a fluorescent hand appeared. Uh-oh, Xander said. What uh-oh? I asked. This one has Jameson's initials on it. Xander moved to the next one. Grayson's, Nash's. At the last one, he paused. Mine. He placed his hand flat on the screen. It made a beeping sound, and then I heard what sounded like a deadbolt being thrown. I tried the door's handle. Still locked. 4 locks, Xander winced. 4 brothers. My face had been needed to get this far. Their hands were required to go further. Chapter 84. Xander left me to guard the room. He said that he would be back with his brothers. Easier said than done. Jameson had made his feelings clear. Grayson had made himself very hard to find. Nash had never gotten sucked into their grandfather's game in the first place. What if they don't come? Whatever was behind this door, it was what Tobias Hawthorne had wanted us to find. October 18th wasn't the answer, not in its entirety. But of all the people in the world with my birthday, why me? What was the billionaire sorry for? There were too many pieces, I thought. I couldn't fit it together, any of it. I needed help. Overhead, there were footsteps. Abruptly, the sound stopped. Xander? I called. No response. Xander, is that you? More footsteps, coming closer. Who else knows about this tunnel? I'd been so intent on finding answers and following this to its end that I'd almost forgotten. Someone in Hawthorne House had given Drake access to the tunnels. These tunnels. I pressed my back against the wall. I could hear someone moving directly up ahead. The footsteps stopped. A figure appeared above me, backlit and looming over my only exit from the place. Female, pale. Rebecca?